Well, welcome again. We're happy, we're blessed whenever there's someone out there. So that you're with us, so be with us today as we do Revelation chapter 9. This is God Prophetic Surprises, GPS, and Dr. Jon, Viana, Pastor Shifra, and me, Pastor Dan. And we're doing the fifth trumpet. It's exciting. I hope that you'll get a Bible or a phone out, and let's do this together. As we said in the last show, we are in what we would Adventists call great controversy land. These are the two sides and the great war going on. We'll learn more in Revelation 12, but here it is. And the key and the pit and the abyss and locusts and darkness and scorpions, all of these symbols are in here. Clearly, star falling, Abaddon, Apollyon. So we thought what we would do today is read the whole passage again, catch us up, and then see if we can push deep into this fifth trumpet today. So you've been chosen.
Thank you.
To read the verses to us. Revelation 9, 1 to what? Verse 12 or 11 at least?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm reading from the NRSV. Chapter 9. And the fifth angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from heaven to earth, and he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. He opened the shaft of the bottomless pit, and from the shaft rose smoke like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened with the smoke from the shaft. Then from the smoke came locusts on the earth, and they were given authority like the authority of scorpions of the earth. They were told not to damage the grass of the earth or any green growth or any tree, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were allowed to torture them for 5 months, but not to kill them. And their torture was like the torture of a scorpion when it stings someone. And in those days, people will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. In appearance, the locusts were like horses equipped for battle. On their heads, what looked like crowns of gold. Their faces were like human faces, their hair like woman's hair, and their teeth like lions' teeth. They had scales like iron breastplates, and the noise of their wings was like the noise of many chariots with horses rushing into battle. They have tails like scorpions with stingers, and in their tails is the power to harm people for 5 months. They have as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek he is called Apollyon.
Wow. I'm gonna buy a recording of you reading the book of Revelation. Yeah, really good, really good.
Well, the question I would ask, where do you find Jesus in this horror show? I mean, this is really a horror show. I once told it as a children's story. Bad news.
What?
Bad idea, yeah. Yeah, you know, you got these locusts flying around, you know, and they come in behind, whoo, you know, and the kids a couple of them went home sick, so it was not good. Don't use it as a children's story. But why is it here then?
I just have to get over my shock for a moment and laughter.
I could see
What's wrong with him, right?
Stories like this when he was little.
I'm just trying to figure out, like, what made you think? Okay, so let's see. A locust that looks like they've got human faces, right? Mm-hmm. They've got gold crowns on their heads. They've got women's hair. Viana, they've got teeth like a lion. Where do you find, is it Jesus specifically in here?
Well, it's supposed to be a revelation of Jesus Christ, it says somewhere.
That's the book.
Yeah.
So, revelation of Jesus Christ, here comes the locust and the fifth trumpet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's, they were told not to damage the grass of the earth or any green growth or any tree.
So that's the limitation we were talking about last time.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I see that protection.
Yeah.
So we studied before, grass is the God's people.
Right.
So the God's people are being protected.
Definitely.
You go back to Luke 10, and Jesus uses the language of this fifth trumpet. I'm not saying he's quoting it, I think it's later, but he's using the language that the fifth trumpet uses to describe his disciples' ministry.
Mm-hmm. They have power.
Yeah, that the power of the snakes and the scorpions will not hurt them. The power of Satan will not hurt them. So that when you're out doing the work of the gospel, there's a protection that is involved. In other words, what evil there is in the world comes with permission, a limited permission on the part of God.
That's the was given. The key was
Yeah.
given. That's by
Yeah.
permission.
And remember we talked, I think, last time about judgment, is that you have judgment where God directly acts, and other judgments are where God lets people go.
So we can kind of think it, if we're going to use the key image, right? This is a limited permission, meaning it's not a master key, right? It's a key to limited
Access.
power.
Well, if the abyss is a demonic place, you may remember that Jesus was engaging some demons once, Luke chapter 8, and they begged him, whatever you do, don't send us into the abyss. So the abyss seems to be a place where demons are restrained or confined. And what we see here in this trumpet is he's opening the abyss. And these locusts are demonic powers that are coming out. So it's depicting a time in Earth's history when God allows Satan more control than usual.
But didn't we talk a couple of episodes ago that this was like the big reveal? Like this was almost like, you go show off, Satan, and do your very best. Like, here it is, unrestrained. Here's the key. Let all these locusts and demonic powers go, and watch me.
And what?
Watch me triumph, even when you've done your best. And for me, that's part of God, like seeing Jesus in there saying, even against the biggest of evils or the most unrestrained evil, I triumph.
So like Satan's Hail Mary, if you will.
Yeah.
Pretty
maybe,
bad
Maybe.
phrase to connect there, but
Am I stretching this?
that's an interesting thought. Because he does get to have more reinforcement, if you will. He's opening up the abyss, out come locusts.
And I
So
think
there's that
the
dynamic.
encouragement here, the Jesus piece of this, is that even at a time in history when there's more satanic revelation than ever before, it says it don't hurt the grass, the green things, the trees. Don't hurt those who are sealed. So there's a sense that that God is always there protecting. Is that physical protection? Are God's people guaranteed that they'll never be hurt by evil?
Are God's people guaranteed a physically pain-free life?
No, because otherwise
No.
these warnings would not be for God's people. Right? These announcements are essentially saying, stay focused, keep your eyes where they should be, stay on the faithfulness, and yeah, otherwise they're not completely guaranteed, right?
I mean, I have a question to
This
go with
sounds
yours.
like a guarantee, though, doesn't it?
It does.
Do not hurt
Right.
those who have the seal of God on their foreheads.
In this context, it sounds like if you're sealed, you're not going to be harmed.
So the question is, what kind of harm is this talking about?
The harm of that the others are receiving, which is in verse 5, where they will not be killed, others who are not sealed, right? With the seal of God on their foreheads, will not be killed, but they will be tortured for 5 months, which, by the way, at some point, I'd really like to talk about the number 5 in the 5th trumpet. So there's like 5 months, 5th trumpet. I want to know more.
I also see...
It's 2 verses away. That's 3 shows from now. Or something.
3 shows from now.
Hold it together. I also see that darkening as a form of that punishment, of a form of torture in a way, when you are no longer allowed to see the light. For me, that's huge. When somebody tells me you'll be in darkness, I can't fathom not having that vision, that clarity to experience God clearly or see Him in His truth clearly.
Someone's blocking their view. The smoke gets in the way of the sun, right? It's an obscurity, as you were saying.
Yeah.
Now, if you take this literally and say that it's literal torture, literal killing or potential for killing, etc., then it would leave the impression that God's people will never ever be hurt while they're doing the mission of the gospel, and I think we know that that's not true. And plenty of missionaries have been killed in the line of duty.
Some would say that's because they didn't have enough faith. If they'd had more faith, they would have been protected.
Can I just say I hate that phrase?
Well, one would think the missionaries would have faith, or they wouldn't have gone, perhaps. But I think that's called protecting your theology rather than dealing with reality.
Yeah.
I mean, all right, if 100 missionaries are killed, are they all unfaithful? Is that why they're killed? That sounds like Job, doesn't it?
Sure.
In Job, his three friends are all saying,
right.
well,
Eliphaz
you
and
got killed,
Bildad.
you must not have been faithful.
Yeah.
All right, that's, and the whole purpose of the book of Job is say no to that. You see, I think if the fifth trumpet is a spiritual thing, if it's about a time when the gospel is gone, people are not hearing it at all, and there's demons everywhere, in that time, spiritually, God's people are being protected.
From
I
what?
remember one time when my wife and I got a phone call at 12:30 in the morning in a motel, and the call was from 3 rooms over.
Oh.
And they said, my roommate has locked herself in the bathroom with razor blades, and she's speaking other languages, other tongues. Could you please come? And we came, and in actual fact, this person was clearly either psychotic or demonically oppressed. And
Or
you know,
both.
there's about 6 of us standing there. It's kind of like all looking at you. What do we do now? You know, and I thought, okay, you guys pray. I'll go talk to her, etc. And the fascinating thing when she finally came out is there were several times when she attacked me physically and dug her fingernails into my body, and I just knew that she could not hurt me.
What?
It got so far, but it never got to the point of harm. It was just, the prayers going up were just amazing. And she cycled through many phases, etc. There was another pastor there, and he did not believe that it was demonic. He thought it was mental illness, And of course, there are those options. But what caused me to think otherwise was at one point, she began speaking in other tongues, Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Wow. And she was reciting things like Satan is the greatest, God is nothing. She was reciting stuff like that, and I knew enough of these languages to know what she was saying. So I said to my wife, go, get my Greek Bible.
Wow.
As I fight fire with fire. Got my Greek Bible, and I began reading Revelation 15. Great and marvelous are your works,
Wow.
O Lord my God.
Come on.
Just and true are your ways, King of the nations, etc. As I read the Greek, she translated.
Wow.
Something no seminary teacher can do,
Wow.
you see. So just, it led me to feel that this was more than just psychotic episode, etc. And the beautiful thing about it, though, is just I've never felt such a sense of peace, never felt such a sense that at this point nothing can harm me. Because God's presence was so powerfully felt. And,
Did you mean that's physically or spiritually?
Yes. Well, as I said, she was attacking me physically.
Okay,
And I did not resist. I had the confidence.
but you just got through saying a few minutes ago, it's a great story, but you
Yeah.
just said a few minutes ago that this passage cannot be referring to God protecting you physically, because we know that that's not always true. You felt that was protected that day.
It's not an absolute promise in all circumstances.
Yeah.
Obviously, because we do know that people sometimes get harmed.
You
But in
were
this-
protected in
but
that
in
story.
this context,
Yeah.
with the prayers behind me and knowing the stakes in the situation, I have never had more confidence in God's presence and protection as I did in those moments. So I just share that only because somehow I think this is all related here. And you would say, if we have images of secularism and images of demonic, what's going on there? And the interesting thing is, it's in the context of secularism that people get desperate for meaning. And demons will be there to satisfy their longings. So all the crazy ideas that you're hearing these days, that's an outgrowth of secularism, that once people lose the center of their lives, once they lose the meaning and the purpose, and our whole society here in the United States has done that. They lost a sense of focus, etc. And at that time, you're desperate for almost anything that sounds half possible.
That sounds like the smoke just beginning to cloud.
Exactly. There's a cloud, there's smoke, there's darkness. Everything's confused. And that can be a torment. This is not a physical torment. It's suicidal anguish. They wanted to die and they can't.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You know, listening to your story, it's so encouraging to me. And I'm reminded of the power of God to physically protect, right? And spiritually protect. And you brought up the story of Job. I heard Pastor Dan's
and
question.
I'm not diminishing God's power to physically protect, but recognizing that God respects freedom so much that he doesn't intervene in many circumstances.
And yet God can intervene, and we've heard now your testimony of God coming into the situation and intervene. So then a lot of people listening, watching, we know that God can. He is able to intervene. He can physically protect. Just a quick thought. Sometimes it's not an issue of believing that God can, but whether he will, right? Sometimes it's not so much about whether God is great and powerful enough, but whether God is good enough. So here we have this, just thinking about that while we dive a little bit deeper in here, there are people who are sealed with the seal of God who are protected. And I'm sure there is someone watching that's thinking, I could sure use some protection from God right now in my situation. How do I know whether I'm going to be guaranteed protection, right? What's the picture of God and his character? Back to your original, where do we find the revelation of who God is in Jesus Christ to tell me about my real day-to-day life situation right now in the fifth trumpet?
Yeah, and the key to that, I think, is the Luke 10. Recognize when you're out doing God's work, God will not allow you to lose your way. Paul says that in the process of doing evangelism, you can lose your way because evangelism's a two-way street. You teach, you learn.
Yeah.
You're getting exposed to all kinds of things. But I will say in that story, the next day, what do you think is the next thing I did? I called a psychiatrist who had experience with demonic possession and shared the whole story with him.
Wow.
And he says, I've been there, done that. I understand what you're saying. I'll talk to her. Because I said, while I believe a tremendous miracle happened last night, I also believe that there'll be physical, mental, and emotional damage from that she will have to address. And he says, I'll work with her. I know where she lives. We can deal with that. But the neat thing about it is it led me at a psychiatry conference not that long ago to talk about what's the difference between severe mental illness and demonic possession. And how would a psychiatrist know the difference? So this one did know the difference. And among the things I learned is one of them, she was exhibiting powers that were not human. The ability to translate languages she was not trained in.
Sure.
Etc. There was another one is if a person is hearing voices, if you hear the voices too, that's demonic. If it's only in their head, that's probably mental illness. Another one is she had some earrings and stuff that were amulets or something. They had a satanic context. And so the pastor and I gathered them up with her permission and went out and threw them in the creek nearby. And from that moment on, the symptoms began to die down until half an hour later, she just says, I'm tired, I want to sleep.
Yeah.
And we prayed and said good night at 3:30 in the morning.
Mercy.
Yeah. Wow.
So can we summarize is that in this great controversy battle, the grass and the trees can be protected physically by prayer, by angels, whatever, but it's not an ironclad promise.
Yeah, it sounds sort of ironclad here, and I would say it's ironclad that God will not allow you to be spiritually overcome by Satan.
That's not, okay, so that's not an if. That's for sure. If you're sealed, if you're the grass and the trees, spiritually you will be protected. He who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. Ephesians 6 says he'll block every fiery dart of the evil one.
It's like the bumper sticker says, God is not dead. I talked to him last night.
Yeah, but so physically we cannot promise it.
The security in the time of secularism is to have a continuing and intimate relationship with God. And you do that by spending time, investing time in God, in the Word and in prayer and things like that.
For me to feel secure in that kind of promise, I would need to know in the text more about the pain. So you're telling me about the grass, what is promised to the grass, the plants, or the trees, which are symbolic of God's people in verse 4. But I hope we can push a little bit further into verse 5 and find out about those who are being tortured for 5 months. What is their pain that feels like the sting of a scorpion?
Well, it says in verse 6, in those days people will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. So this is what I've called suicidal anguish.
Right.
And that's when life is so meaningless, etc., that a person might wish not to be there, but they are not able to. In other words, they're in that in-between place where they wish that they were dead, but that was not an option. The question is, who is doing the tormenting?
The demons, the locusts.
It's the locusts, it's the scorpions. And by the way, combining those two, locusts in ancient world symbolize quantity, a huge amount.
Right.
Scorpions symbolize intense pain, intense consequence. So you have the numerousness of locusts with the painful power of the scorpion. That's an image.
Wow.
That's a powerful image of torment, etc. And who is the one doing the torment? In verse 11. They have as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit.
Abaddon.
His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, which is Hebrew for the destroying one. And in Greek, he's called Apollyon, which is Greek for the destroying one. So there is one who is a destroyer. What does that make God?
Not
Life
a
giver.
destroyer.
Okay, what would be the opposite of destroyer?
Protector.
Build upper.
The build-upper, okay, yeah.
Creative.
I think it's, I think it is Taleb who wrote Antifragile, the book. He says the opposite of fragile, usually people think is something that won't crack, that will resist, but that's like saying the opposite of negative is neutral. The opposite of what is fragile would be something that actually builds up in the presence of chaos and like a diamond, sort of, and all that pressure and force, it's the opposite. So if the destroyer is the king of the locusts, the king is the angel from the bottomless pit, verse 11, then God can't just be preventer and protector. He also is diamond maker.
And here's the interesting thing. Satan would want you to think that everything that's going wrong in your world and your life is God.
Yeah.
Why is God doing this to me? Is something you often hear even in hospital beds. Why is God doing this to me? And the answer here is God is not the one doing this to you.
The locust.
Satan is the one doing this. And Satan is the one who tortures.
So are we confidently able to say that Abaddon and Apollyon is that fallen angel is Satan? Is that correct?
That is, I think, how we should read this passage. And part of it goes back to the third trumpet, where we saw this falling star was the image of Isaiah 14, you know, and the image of Lucifer, etc., and the language of destroyer, and the parallel to Luke 10.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that.
Absolutely.
Jesus using the language that we have in the fifth trumpet, he's talking about Satan's power and how that won't hurt his disciples. So the parallel there, I think, is unforgettable. If you read Revelation without the parallels, you can make almost anything of this kind of stuff. But when you take the time with the parallels, I think it helps.
So this is evil versus evil.
Yeah. Well, this whole
Is
question.
that what you're saying about John? This is evil versus evil.
Yeah. Yeah.
Evil is hurting the people who are not protected.
Yeah. That's right. So you commit your life to Satan, and the consequences are horrific.
So would it be fair to read this and say, I am being told that this is going to happen, therefore commit yourself to God so that this doesn't happen? Or am I reading this as in like, this is happening right now, or this happened already? How could I correctly read that?
Well, historically, I would understand that as a pretty good description of where we are right now,
Yeah.
where secularism is the primary way of thinking. Religion, particularly Christianity, the only religion you can't profess in the United States today is Christianity. You'll be mocked wherever you go. That's an odd turnaround when it used to be everybody else suffered that in this country. But it's a remarkable turn of affairs, and in that context, there's no central lodestar for people's lives.
So what could give people the confidence to say, oh yeah, no, I'm sealed, like I identify as one of the sealed?
That's a good question. How do you know that you're sealed? I bet you know the answer to that.
Yes, we know that baptism is one of the seals given by the Holy Spirit. But is there a more complex answer to that?
Well, I would say sealing happens first of all when there's a total commitment made to Jesus Christ in the person's life. And in that context, the Holy Spirit enters one's life and the fruits of the Spirit begin to grow. That's metaphoric language. What are the fruits of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace, patience, etc. Not perfectly. It's a process. It's a lifelong process. But when changes are happening in your life that are unexplainable, you just know. You know, I committed myself to God, and suddenly I'm a different person than I was. That's when you begin to sense the Spirit's at work in my life, doing things that I can't explain. That's when assurance begins to come.
Kind of like your story, when you just knew you were going to be well.
Oh, I knew on that occasion. Never was I more clear.
Wow.
Never was the gospel more powerful. And I would just keep saying, you know, you're not talking about God. God loves you and God cares about you.
Amen.
So being sealed would be feeling like that all the time.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
Settled into the truth.
yeah, so that you cannot be moved.
They're giving us a signal. The time has come. It says GPS. We're happy that you're here. Please come back to us and we'll go on with the fifth trumpet. God bless.